Hello and welcome back to The Calm in the Complicated. I'm Carrie Grant and I'm here with our resident Cerebra ambassador, Samantha Flynn.
Hello, Carrie.
So good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Now today we're going right back to the very beginning in what we're calling day one. It's the big one. We're talking about that pivotal moment when you either receive a formal diagnosis or you simply realise in your gut that something isn't quite right. I say that in inverted commas. With your child. It's a moment that stays etched in your mind forever. We want to hold space for those feelings and talk about how you navigate those very first steps. And we have the perfect person to help us do that. Very excited that we are joined today by Dr. Karen Russell.
Hi.
Now, Karen has spent nearly 30 years as a specialty doctor in community paediatrics, but she's also a mum to 3 children with neurological conditions. She's been the one delivering the news and the one receiving it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So let's go back to that very first moment. I'm sure there are several moments, but that moment in a parent's life where they realise actually something is a bit different to what I was expecting. What are your experiences with parents?
I mean, our first thoughts as a parent will be, are they going to be okay? And there's this sort of almost panic and extreme emotional flooding that goes through your body. And I believe it's a physical thing that we experience as
That's
someone
trauma.
breaks that news to us. Yeah. And if it's embedded on previous trauma, it'll be felt more. It takes a lot of emotional resilience to get through that grieving cycle. And we know that there's the stages of grief and the final one being acceptance. I think the difference with...
Rewind.
Go on.
Stages of grief. Tell us, what are they? Just so I can tick them off my
I can't remember
list.
them off the top of my head.
What are they? But they include...
They include shock and
right.
probably
Which is
disbelief.
that moment of...
It's
That's that
disbelief.
moment.
And I think some of us go through that
Disbelief.
before we actually get a diagnosis.
Yes.
So we inside go, no, my child can't be autistic. I'm just going to get on with this.
Disbelief.
I don't believe my child can't walk because they've got cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
It's not happened. I'm going to pretend it's not happening.
So denial.
Yeah. And denial comes sort of, there's the grief, then there's the denial and this disbelief, probably beforehand. There's a point where you start coming to terms with it, but you're quite angry. And I don't know if you guys have felt angry about the things that perhaps your children haven't had as a result of their differences or might not have in the future. And anger's sometimes a good place to be because it actually starts that engine going and you will get where you need to go next. And there's a period of sort of like, oh, well, this is it. And you have to change your cognitions, by which I mean you have to change how you think about this child in front of you. And the thing is about this type of grief is there is still a child there that needs your love, care, attention and support. It isn't actually a loss as finite as somebody dying. It is a very different type of grief. So when you get to acceptance and you're actually maybe going along that lovely mill pond and nothing's being tipped up, you're still somehow hyper vigilant. You've always got your eyes and ears everywhere because you don't know what's going to come next. And that's when the scab gets ripped open, starts bleeding profusely, and the grieving cycle starts again. It might be a new additional diagnosis. I don't know if for you guys, you've had additional diagnoses for your child.
Some of my kids are just keeps going.
Yeah. I mean, the list gets longer and longer and longer.
Play poker.
Yeah.
But then it is also, there are some parents who will receive a diagnosis really, really early on in a child's life, genetic syndromes, for example. And then there are other parents who won't receive that answer for such a long time.
Well, they never even receive that answer. And that's a really unsettling place to be. Have a diagnosis that isn't a diagnosis. There is an agency called Syndrome Without a Name that support families who have a child where we feel their difficulties could be explained by a genetic type of disorder, but we haven't been able to identify it. And that's just heartbreaking because you don't feel like you've ever got closure. Absolutely. And closure is so important. I understand my son is autistic, has severe learning disabilities. Okay, I'm really upset and really frustrated that this has happened to us, but I can go forward with that knowledge, and I've now got that in my handbag to carry along with me. If I'm told, well, your child can't do this and can't do that, and they've got these seizures, but don't respond to that medication, but we haven't worked out what it is, you're left in this no man's land. You're left feeling like,
how do you plan? How do you then go forward?
Mm.
How do you see what might be coming
exactly.
to you?
And I guess I'm in a privileged position that many of my patients were further on in the journey when I was bringing James up, and as a result, I have seen what was coming ahead for us. It certainly took my husband, who's non-medical, a lot longer to realise.
I can imagine.
And often it's the mum who's there first, but sometimes it's the other way around. The mum has become too entrenched with the child and can't see the challenges that they're experiencing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is there ever a time, I'm going to play devil's advocate just for a moment. Is there ever a time where you would say, best not to give them a diagnosis? Like the label thing. You know, I love labels, but
That's interesting.
some people
I think,
really have a problem with it, don't they?
I think when parents refuse a diagnosis, I will never say in my reports, this child is autistic, but the parents have decided not to pursue the diagnosis. That's disrespectful. That's their choice. I can guide them and tell them what I'd do if they ask me, but I can't tell them what to do. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday who's got a child on her waiting list, not waiting list, but follow up, who's got a neurodegenerative condition, and she's pretty sure she knows what it is, and she hasn't been able to bring herself to share that with the family yet. She's pushing for the genetic.
That's the next stage. That's another stage, though, isn't it? Sharing it.
Yes, but
perhaps.
she feels that I want to withhold this at the moment because I think it might devastate them, and we don't have confirmation, because there's nothing worse than being told it's probably this, and then it turns out it's not this, it's something possibly worse or maybe better. But so, I understand from a clinician's side, but I always ask, what do you think is going on here? So if I had asked that family if they'd been seeing me and they said, we think it's syndrome X, I'd go, that's what I suspect too. I would meet them where they are. I don't want to drag them along with me kicking and screaming, because that's not going to be good for anybody. It's not going to be good for our professional working relationship, but it's not going to be good for them emotionally. I have to meet my families where they are in this journey. And I know that's, some people go, oh, it's not a journey, but life is a journey. Of course it is, for every one of us.
And with grief, do you think that, I noticed that with the group that we run, we've got 300 families, autism families, that it's an autism support group that we've run for the last 14 years. And I'm noticing, because we've been running it for 14 years, some of those children are now in their 20s. And so in some ways, life is a little bit easier because school is no longer there.
Yeah.
And that has always been historically just trying to access services. Now our parents have learned to write all the emails, do all the litigation, work out how to parent their child, They've got all of that in place. And it then feels like there's a second wave, which is what happens next. Now they're in adulthood and there's a real sense of maybe life is different, even worse than perhaps they thought it would be, or they start worrying about what happens when I'm gone.
Yeah.
There's like another wave somehow.
Yeah, and I think I've used the phrase before of this chronic sorrow. So there's this thing that goes on and it comes, like you say, in waves, and it's really profound, and you can go through quite intense grieving. I found when my son's cohort were doing GCSEs and A levels, there were a few tears that didn't make sense at the time, but now it's like, well, of course. I was just thinking it was another thing he couldn't do. He can't drive. He'll never drive a car. So when he passed 17, so all of the
milestones, yes,
and all of the cards out there have 17 and like an L plate and whatever.
They do.
And actually, we're constantly, as parents of children who are experiencing these things, reminded of what they can't do instead of celebrating what they can do. And my son is an expert croissant eater.
But then that's the thing, isn't it? And I think that it becomes very a cycle of grief, doesn't it? Rather than actually, okay, who is your child? And yes, this child might not be the child that I thought that I would be parenting, but actually, how can I show up best for that child? And how can we live the best life for us? How can we thrive as a family?
Sometimes we learn, I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned is how to hold two contradicting thoughts simultaneously. And I don't think most neurotypical setups have to even ever think about that, really. I think when you hold grief and you hold immense pride side by side. You hold joy and you hold sadness side by side. And I think how we learn to sit with that coexistence, I think, is part of our parenting journey.
And a lot of really difficult thoughts come to us as parents. I have a neighbour whose son has a complex neurological condition and is likely to die in early adulthood. She shared with me the other day that she's hoping he dies before she does. And that is something she's going to be carrying to her deathbed.
Feels like you've gone over to the dark side in terms of how we talk.
It's a club that you didn't expect to ever join,
right?
And don't want membership to. Thank you. Can I give it back? No, you can't actually.
Yeah.
You can't resign from this. You're always that child's parent.
So parents are having to digest a lot of information from day one. So how would you improve your professional life? How would you suggest that they access support? What can they do for themselves and what can other people do for them?
Oh, that's sometimes $1 million question, isn't it?
It is.
And I think all of us have that in our lives. I think the first thing I say to parents is you have to look after yourself first. You can't parent your child if you're trying to pour from an empty cup. So please fill your cup up. Find out what makes you feel full and resilient and good. Do that thing, whatever it is, as long as it's not illegal or life-threatening, and go with it. And once you've made that space, you will find it's easier to find the spaces in which to support your child. And reach out for that help. Find out about what's available locally. That might be through the local authority. Every local authority has their local offer, which might mean nothing to you, and it might all be irrelevant to you. Find other people who are in the area whose children have the same condition. We have Down syndrome support groups all over the country. We have there's Tick Fest that happens once a year through the Tourette's one of the Tourette's support groups, and they have a great big party in a field somewhere with tents, and they all are ticking away there, and it's just accepted. The National Autistic Society are a national organisation. They have some groups locally as well. They will know others, and then places like Cerebra, Syndrome Without a Name, and reach out. And if they don't know what they can give, ask them where to go next, because power comes from feeling supported.
And can I ask about that? So with some parents may feel like they don't necessarily know where to reach out to, but also it could be who can help me? How will that help? Being part of a support group, for example. And I wonder if you can speak to that's almost the power of support groups and yourself as well, Carrie, with
Carrie's probably got seen it happen
with your experience.
You know what I love?
Of you.
I love when a new person comes into the room who's never had the opportunity to share with other parents who are going through the same thing. And we have this messaging, certainly in the autism world. Obviously, we're covering everything here, but there is this thing that if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So because we've got that in our heads, we think my situation is just completely unique. And you sit down in a room of 30 people, and someone across the way says, my 13-year-old daughter is blah, blah, blah at school, and this is the depression, and this is where we're at. And I've tried to access CAMS, and it's not working. And the person that's just sitting has just come in for the first time. You just see a tear go down, and you just think, this is a moment. This is when they have realised, I'm not alone.
Yes. So only yesterday we have a parent support meeting for my son's school, and one of the parents her son had been there for a year, and it's her first attendance. I don't attend regularly and wasn't actually there. Today she said, what an outpouring of love I've had. The lack of a school gates. We don't make connections at the school gates with other people like us always. We can feel very isolated. Our children might be taken off on minibus. I don't know the other children in my son's class, whatever. And that can be the same for whatever underlying condition your child has. So it's a brave step to make that step through the door into the support group. But once you get there, if it's the right group for you, you will feel like you're in a big warm hug, and people finally get you and your experience and love you for it and understand you instinctively. I mean, that's so powerful.
It really is. And you said about if it's the right group for you. And sometimes I think we can be put off by going to the wrong group for us. And it might be the right group for lots of other people, but it might not fit our way
Yeah.
of being.
So
it's important.
I tell parents to go out and try lots of different things and work out which of these groups you like. Because there's 3 or 4 different organisations in Hertfordshire that do support. Now I know there's yours as well, Carrie. I'm going to be sending all my patients to you.
We've got so many referrals these days. But I think it is about having a space where you can describe without having to explain.
Yes.
And they get the backstory because they know the backstory.
Yeah.
Everyone's got similar backstories.
Yes. Absolutely.
So
And there's something powerful about being with people who are in your tribe. And these people are your tribe. And it might be that you find it through religion. It might be that you find it through, being a part of the peer support network. It might be that you find it through being professional and being the Senko at school now, and then all the parents come running to you, and you're like, I can do this.
Gives you voice.
Yes.
There are situations
and there's
where it
a
gives you
lot
voice.
of power in numbers, isn't there?
There
I'm
really
sure you
is.
find that from your group,
Yeah,
Carrie.
absolutely. And I think the same of the parent carer forums, which
Oh,
are all
yes.
over the country, and every local authority should have a parent carer forum.
Yes.
And some of them, I have to say, I don't know how they all function, but I know 1 or 2 that function really well, and they really do lobby for change. So again, it's finding your voice because you feel so voiceless.
Yes.
So that can be a good.
And our children
good
are
thing.
often voiceless. We are talking about sometimes children who will never speak. Children who have no way of communicating.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of misunderstanding about that in the world. And we have to be their advocates then.
Yeah. Yeah. So can we talk then about, this feels like a dreaded moment in most parents' experience. They've got the diagnosis, they're getting their head around it, and then they realise, because people are asking questions in the family, what is this with your child? And you have to share your child's diagnosis. Whether that could be with the family, but it could also be you've got to take them to a choir meeting because they said they wanted to join a choir, and you've got to explain your child to somebody. But particularly those emotional situations where you've then got to carry everybody else's grief. When
And
you're
that's
still
where the
dealing with your own.
scab
Right, tell us.
is reopened and the grief comes back. My personal opinion is be honest, be open, and be accessible. So what would you like to know and understand about Johnny? I can tell you all the things he likes, all the things he's good at, that are a result or are part of him, and they may be driven by their diagnosis. I think if it's family members, there's sometimes things like YouTube or TED Talks or something that you can guide families
Google
to.
is free, right?
Sadly,
Let me just
sometimes, but
yeah, Google
it's
is free.
also, I mean, let's be honest, Carrie, we can go out and look up anything and find the answer we want if we look in the right places.
It's true.
So I would suggest parents look at the materials I suggest to them for sharing the diagnosis and decide which ones will talk to their mother, their uncle, their sister best. There's still a lot of misunderstanding, even once you've explained the diagnosis to them, whatever that is. And grandparents often feel disempowered. They've got to come to terms with that grief as well themselves, that they're no longer grandparents to the child they thought their daughter had. And let's not forget, in a way, there's a double impact. They have their own sorrow, but they're holding their child's grief. Because don't forget, mum is a child to somebody else. Dad is a child to another person as well.
I feel like I often ask people to be curious with me, because I think that should be an invited thing, because the weight of it is on us to have to explain everything, and that's quite difficult. But I do welcome curiosity. I remember a friend of mine going to work at Chicken Shed years ago, and it was going back about 30 or 40 years now. And she said she had never, ever been allowed to look at a physically disabled person because she'd grown up in a generation where it was like, don't look, that's impolite, that's rude to look. So
avert your eyes.
Avert your eyes. And then she's like, I'm going to work at Chicken Shed. And she was invited to a performance before she went to work. And she said it was so brilliant because everyone was just on stage. And she said, I felt like I got educated in an hour and a half. I was educated, so I was ready to work for the company. And I wish that we had more opportunities to do that. Yes, in neurodivergence, in everything.
Go and sit in Great Ormond Street,
right?
Actually in one of the cafes on near Great Ormond Street Hospital. And you'll see it all. You'll see tracheostomies. You'll see, physically very disabled children.
Normalising that, right?
Absolutely. And I am so glad that the children I see now for assessment are growing up in this world, not the one I grew up in.
Yeah.
Because I do think there has been more understanding, more acceptance, more advocacy, and there's a rich future ahead of them. They're very fortunate to be growing up in this place, and it's going to only get better. It can only get better because soon the world is going to be, changing and led by people who see the world differently. And
I think that's a really important point, though, isn't it? That the communities that are being built by parents of disabled children, but also by disabled children and disabled adults, the self-advocacy groups are so important in changing the way that we see the world and changing the way that the world works for us and for our children.
Yeah. And
I think
my
that's
Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health actually have a subcommittee that are all young people who have various
that.
diagnoses, and they're called RCPCH and us, and their motto is nothing about us without us.
Absolutely.
And that just speaks so much to my heart.
Knowledge is power, but sometimes the most powerful thing is just knowing you aren't the only one on this path, which is exactly why we love hearing from you. This is where we pass the mic to you lot. We've always been clear that this podcast should be about a proper chat, not just us talking at you. And that means getting to hear your voices in here too. On today's episode, we've got a community message from Isabel about her day one journey.
My name's Isabel. I live in Wales. We'll be talking today about Jesse, my firstborn. I can't think of a bigger joy, really, than going through life with Jesse and helping him to get where he got. I guess in a way, without a diagnosis, there wasn't any rule book. There weren't specific boxes to tick. And we were also free to a certain extent of knowing what the future might hold. So it was really living in the moment. In those moments when you could forget the hospital stuff and the paperwork, there was lots of hope and fun and silliness. There wasn't the burden of the diagnosis. It would be easier if there was a day one, because looking back, it was months of starting to suspect that Jesse might be unwell. Or have a condition that we didn't know about. So it's a big blur, those first months. And I think the struggle was, had somebody said, this is what's going on, and it felt like there was a start to that process, maybe there would be some sort of roadmap to navigate. But for us, I think it was around when he was 3 months, 4 months, I started to go to baby groups and notice he wasn't quite doing the same things as other children. Started to have an inkling something wasn't right. He would never settle in a way that I saw other babies settle when you soothed them or picked them up. And many, many trips to the health visitor saying, I think something's going on here. Can you help me? I was a first-time mum, so a lot of that was dismissed. They thought I was an anxious mum. There was a lot of reassurance about all babies reaching milestones at different times. But after many, many appointments, I rocked up to a GP when he was around 6 months, and it was very clear that he was falling behind. So at that point, we got a referral to a community paediatrician, and in that office, and I remember it vividly, all of the details, that was the first doctor who really listened and really looked at Jesse and said, I agree, something isn't quite right here. And that started the journey to trying to find a diagnosis. That consultation for me was a huge relief, because finally somebody was seeing what I saw. It was interesting because it was a different reaction from my partner, who was in that room too. For him, it was a huge shock, because it was a shock for him because, we saw slightly different things, and to find out your child might have a rare condition was obviously very upsetting. From that point on, things felt like they moved very quickly, because before we'd just been waiting and waiting and waiting for somebody to take this seriously. So immediately he had scans, lots of blood tests. That week we were back and forth to the hospital, lots and lots. So that was a shock to the system, the pace suddenly. And then from that pace, it was silence and waiting. And I think many parents have the same thing, a long, long, long wait for any test results to come back. So we were left with very little. We were left, there wasn't a leaflet to give us because there was no fact sheet. We didn't know what we were dealing with. Obviously, you were left with all the possibilities that the internet presents, and it was a battle to try and stop ourselves from going down all of those avenues to try and suss it out. And it was also a battle to advocate for what he needed in that moment, because just because a diagnosis might be on the horizon, it didn't change his needs now. So it was then about navigating the world of the support that he needed without being able to say, this is what the condition is. And that was always difficult. Thinking about the support system around a family, professionals are one thing, but something that I wish I'd done differently at that time was to welcome in family and friends more into what that was like not having a diagnosis. Because I think at the time I was just waiting for somebody to tell me what it was. And in a way, I stopped myself from sharing what was going on because I thought that was always around the corner. And a diagnosis for us actually never came. And I think if I had had a diagnosis, I might have invited people in to share in that more. And that's through, we might have been part of a charity, a support group. The circle of support would have been wider. So I'd say don't wait to get help, because that's the thing that's going to keep you all going. And just because it's not easy to explain to people, you still need to stress the difficulty of that situation and find ways, even if it's not you, even if it's someone you trust, of explaining how that's quite a unique scenario to be in and that you might need extra support because of it.
Wow. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you very much. So I think that one of the things that struck me about Isabel's story is the different speeds of or the different pace that she had to take. So that, the really lengthy waiting, the constant chasing of professionals to try to instigate a process, and then the process happening like that, but then, being a whirlwind, not being able to process.
Like going from first gear to fourth gear without anything in between.
Then putting the brakes back on.
And then they pulled the handbrake. I mean, I would hope that isn't how I would manage a family in a similar situation. I would be making regular contact, explaining that, the MRI scan or whatever has the reason we've not got the result is that we've sent it to other professionals, or we've had a preliminary, but it doesn't show anything. I've asked someone expert and that's going to take longer. So keeping families in the loop about what's actually happening. It's not that nothing is happening. It's that they don't know what is happening. So they can assume nothing's going on now. And I want to be open to my patients, and I want to be treating them as if, as I would want to be treated. I would be telling my mum, if it was her results, I'd be telling them what that was. So I'll do the same with my patients.
Then Isabel did say as well that they never received a diagnosis, and the difficulty, we've touched on it already, but the difficulty then we've talked about as well, finding your tribe. If you can't necessarily...
which tribe you belong to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. You might have fingers in multiple pots. And I think that's where my analogy of looking after yourself. So your tribe might end up being other singers in your choir. It might end up being other community faith leaders and healers or whatever. Just because they're not experiencing exactly what you are, they may well be able to help you in ways you didn't expect. And I think Isabel's comments about letting people in, even in that area of uncertainty, that's so important, because that's the time when we as parents are most vulnerable, when there are all these what ifs. And I guess even after diagnosis, there's always what ifs, And I think sometimes that coming to terms with the fact that you're not on the path that you thought you were on, you're actually on this path. And it can take you a long time to stop trying to go onto the wrong path. And I'm often, telling parents how proud I am of the fact that they're at a follow-up appointment actually parenting the child they've got, not the one they wish they had. And, other things that people share with you, like, oh, all kids do that. That's so invalidating, because it's not accepting that your experience of your child is different.
I do wonder as well about friends before children and, early friends as well during maybe baby classes, etc., etc. And then when you do notice that your child isn't necessarily meeting the same milestones at the same time as those friends that you've developed, And then all of a sudden, almost that dropping off of friendship groups that you maybe have worked really hard to establish, but then are no longer
You don't fit.
compatible.
You don't
Yeah.
fit.
You're no longer
Someone is
compatible.
saying, I just don't know how I'm going to get Johnny through his SATs. I think I'll get a private tutor. And you're thinking, as long as my child's taking oxygen in and carbon dioxide's coming out, I'm like, good, that's a great day.
Yeah.
And don't you think, I don't know if it's similar for you guys, that I think there is some natural fall off of those sort of friends that you've made through a joint experience. And you start finding the ones who are actually true friends, because they're the ones that stick by you despite.
Absolutely.
That's the
or
day one.
because of.
Yeah,
That's the day
that's
one.
another day one.
Of a new
Absolutely.
village, of a new
Absolutely.
tribe
And I
that
think
you have to
there's
find.
constant new day ones. And then, it's then finding those new friendships that you can forge where you can work together. And we are more isolated as parents of children who have a disability. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And we know that the costs of looking after our children are higher, and that's got, huge consequences on our long-term future, and ironically our ability to support our children beyond the days where we're earning money. But
Yes.
that's,
There's
and
so much to it,
it
which is why
is.
that village, day one,
It's so
is
important.
the first day of finding that.
I do find as well the resilience that we have to build as parents is
So true.
doesn't always come naturally. It's sometimes an uphill struggle to get to that point. But we have to, I think, be more resilient than maybe we were expecting to be as parents.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, our children teach us so much. James has taught me patience. He's taught me humility. Not that I didn't have it, but really, I'm humbled by him on a regular basis. This is a child who at 22 probably has an IQ, an intellectual level of around a 3-year-old, but he still teaches me things. Personally, I think one of the first things that should come as part of a package of care, and I know there's no such thing, but this is in my ideal world, this imaginary world, is mental health support for parents
Goodness gracious.
as
So
a
important.
prescription. Here is 6 weeks of counselling to help you come to terms with this child that you are now parenting. Here is someone to talk to, which is a safe space to say, I hope my child dies before I do, without commitment, without judgment and without fear at all. I think parents need that really early on, because we have to fight to get it. And we are often ending up with our own diagnoses of mental health conditions, trauma, which is sometimes institutional. This is sometimes the result of the way the professionals treat us, and other horrific experiences that no one should have to experience, let alone a parent who's going above and beyond. And I passionately think that we need to support those parents, because let us not forget, they are saving the state a lot of money. If every parent said, not doing this
Carer,
anymore,
yeah.
can't do it, no one's giving me any support, have my child, can you imagine the tax bills we'd have?
Then we also have, the first line of support tends to be parenting classes, doesn't it? That we need to learn how to parent. And so often those parenting classes don't really cater to our needs.
They're not relevant to the children that we're parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I know that, some of them have had a SEND focus, but actually these parenting classes are mostly for families where they're really at sea with how to bring up a child, full stop. Excuse me, but you've usually got to the point where you've had to navigate several professionals, and then the paediatrician says, I think you should go to these parenting classes. I'll send you a link. It's really not helpful, and it's othering. And again, maybe we need to have more research into what parents need in order to create
Aaron, I'm on it.
Excellent. High five.
I think if professionals knew that behind their backs, and I want to be unified with the professionals, hear me on that, but I think if they knew the names that we call parent training courses and how you just learnt an acronym last week and now you're going to pass it on to us. We are like ninjas, we're like parental ninjas, aren't we?
Yeah.
Just to say, for those parents that are on day one, looking at parents that are on day 5,000, we didn't start like this. We were also those parents that were like, I don't know what any of this is about. Well, you probably did because you're a paediatrician, but actually you did because you're a researcher. I didn't. Okay.
Sorry, Carrie.
I didn't know.
I didn't
most
know
parents
that
don't
you
know.
could have what's called, for James, he used to read the Very Hungry Caterpillar and other books. I didn't know that was actually delayed echolalia.
Yes.
So I learnt from him.
Yeah.
We do
And it's
learn.
not covered in our syllabi. And I think just meet your child where they are, meet yourself where you are with a degree of acceptance. Do some mindfulness, because that's shown to be the most helpful strategy for managing stress, particularly if you're neurodivergent. There's lots of research behind that. And embrace it and accept it. It's hard to accept, though. I do know that in those early months, I shed a lot of tears over my newborn baby who was in a sling on my front while we were going to speech and language therapy and occupational therapy and ADOS assessments and paediatric and MRIs and EEGs and all these awful words that you don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
And this baby was bathed in tears.
Do you ever worry about that?
That's a good question. That it might have somehow affected her, you mean?
Well, I think because I'm mother to 4 children, I think, oh gosh, is this one's grief that this one's causing on that one? Do you get a knock-on effect?
There is definitely there's always balancing to be done in any family. And I see that in many of my families too. And that how hard it is, particularly when you've got 2 neurodivergent children or disabled children with different needs. One loves the quiet, one loves to make loads of noise, but can't bear the smell of the thing that the other one oh my goodness.
Your newborn's in a sling and you are grieving about your firstborn. That must be really hard.
Yes, and there were times where I thought, can I be a parent to either of them? Am I good enough?
Yeah.
Is this... one thing we didn't touch on is the fact you think it's your fault. One of the things I always tell my parents is whatever has happened to their child, whatever the diagnosis, it is not their fault. Even if it's a genetic diagnosis that the mum carries and has passed on, it's not her fault. She didn't say to the
I'd
egg,
really like that DNA. Yeah.
go and Google that, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, But I still carry a bit of guilt. I spoke to a parent only a couple of days ago where I reassured her that something she thought might have caused the problems she was talking about absolutely didn't, and explained why, and explained that, for me, I'd had similar things. And I think, the path that I ended up on, where there were all these appointments that this baby was dragged along to, that used up all my maternity leave. I got to the end of that time. We moved house, because that's what you do when you have a newborn, isn't it? About a year later or 3 weeks before, I think. It's one of the two. And I just had to say, I don't think I can come back to work at the moment, because I will not be the doctor I need to be.
Yeah.
And I will not be doing my children justice by leaving them. Well, number one, I think another thing that maybe needs to be talked about is childcare for disabled children, or the lack of childcare and the lack of suitable childcare. So that was the first barrier. And number two, I knew I had a battle ahead about what school James would go to and things like that. And I needed to be at home. I wasn't ready to go back to work, but it made maternity leave totally different. And then when I, a few years later, decided we'd throw a third one in the mix.
Wow. Rewind.
With that knowledge. Well, you
go
see,
back.
That was another day one. This time, I'm doing this with the knowledge I already have a very disabled child.
Yes.
And, things that happened during the process of trying to conceive the third, including a loss, which was down to a genetic condition.
Goodness.
Imagine all of this is sitting on my shoulders every day. No wonder I'm going to undergo some trauma-related EMDR therapy soon.
Recommend it.
Yes.
Very, very highly.
Yes. But, yeah.
Now, if you'd like to send us an email or a community message, please send it to calm@cerebra.org.uk, and we might be able to use it in a future episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Karen.
Thank you for
You've
having
been
me.
amazing.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed the time with you.
What a gift you are. And before we go, a reminder that Cerebra and the support they offer only exist because of people like you. Cerebra is a charity, and every fundraiser, every donation, and every social media share helps keep these guides and helplines free for families who have just reached their day one. You can find links to helpful resources and guides at cerebra.org.uk in the episode's show notes, along with some other organisations and charities that may also help. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you are not on your own.
Thank you. Bye.
See you.